الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد. The title that was assigned was in relation to contemporary issues and challenges. Well, homosexuality is one of those, but since I'll be speaking about that in the seminar, I won't discuss it here. There were two or three things I wanted to cover, one of them in detail, the other two just in passing. And the first issue, which for some reason has kind of gone out of control, and maybe the offices of the Maraji didn't monitor this very well. It's possible. And that's the question of awareness to Muslims in relation to ghasb. Ghasb, it means usurping, usurpation. And that's when you take someone's belongings or rights without any Sharia justification. This is a very important concept, and in our fiqh, in our jurisprudence, we have chapters and chapters on this issue, pages and pages. In other denominations, the section in their fiqh on ghasb and usurping may only mount to a few lines, but in ours, we have chapters on this issue of usurping, and that it's haram. And the most important is the rights of Amir al-Mu'mineen being usurped, for example, after the demise of the Holy Messenger. But whenever one's belongings or rights, doesn't matter, when it's taken without any Sharia justification, this is a very serious haram with a lot of spiritual consequences and side effects. Because if a land, for example, is usurped, praying on that land is invalid. It's not accepted. Your fasting is not accepted. Your sleeping there is haram. Your eating there on that land is haram. Drinking, haram. Building something on that land is haram. Building a mosque, doesn't matter, is haram. If something is usurped, a lot of serious consequences follow. And if a child is born on usurped land, the ahadith speak that they will encounter a lot of grief, sorrow, pain. And maybe one can conclude that their route to salvation, such a child, will be limited, not shut off, will be less, will be compromised to some degree. Not that they're going to go to hell, but their potential is limited. And so this is important. We have to pay attention to this. I'll go through a few ahadith. The Holy Messenger of Islam said, whoever takes a believer's belongings unrightfully in the form of usurpation, ghasb, Allah will constantly turn away from them, dissatisfied with the good and virtuous actions which they have committed. And Allah will not record those actions amongst the person's good deeds until he repents and returns the seized belonging to its owner. So repenting is one thing, but then you have to also commit yourself to this wajib action, which isn't essentially part of repentance, but it's something wajib, compensation for the wrongdoing that you did. Some sins, there are no compensation, there's only repentance. Some sins though, there's repentance plus that compensation of the sin. This is one of those. Or for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam said, the usurped stone of a house will be a precursor to its ruin. It will be a cause to the ruin of that house. It may be a material ruin, it may be a spiritual ruin. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, if one were to even usurp a handbreadth of land from another person, on the day of resurrection, that which had become usurped manifests as a ring of fire which is hung around the usurper's neck, and the usurper will be dragged along the roads of resurrection with disgrace, unless he repents. And as they are usurping, they are burning. It's just that they don't see it right now. After physical death, it will manifest before them. Even in the Quran, there are verses that those who consume orphans' property wrongfully, they're consuming fire. That's one form of usurpation. But this consuming of fire is happening right now. They're consuming fire as they are sinning, but they don't see it because they're drowned in the physical realm. When they detach from the physical realm with physical death, their hell doesn't start. It started with their actions. Their hell manifests before them. Heaven and hell don't start after death. They started as you acted. Your actions. You are your actions. And there are other traditions that we have that a usurped land or house is free of barakah. There's no blessing in that house. Angels don't visit it. It leads to the unit's wretchedness, and so on and so forth. And the fatwas of the Maraji is clear. There's no doubt. It's unanimous, indisputable. It's one of the major sins. If a house or plot of land were to be usurped, even a fraction of it, they say praying in such a house is void. The fasts are problematic. Sleeping, eating, drinking is haram, and so on and so forth. These are all indisputable facts. So the problem is, why has it got out of hand here? Ayatollah Khomeini wrote a letter to the youth many years ago, the youth of North America and Europe. And he said that it's got to study your past, the history of America, for example, or Canada, or different European countries. He didn't mention usurpation, but maybe he wanted the youth to understand the history of their countries. And this is the problem, that there are many countries which are based on stealing of land, genocide of the indigenous populations, ethnic cleansing, and then they build an environment for themselves. Canada is a very big example. Australia, America, to different degrees. There are maps which tell you which parts are usurped. And why then the question arises that why are so many Muslims living in Canada? Why are they going there more and more? If this is such an indisputable fact in fiqh, what happened? When did the floodgates open and we didn't realize? And now you want to tell them it's haram where you're living? That mosque that you've built is haram? These are very serious implications here. The representatives of the Maraji, did they know? Do they know? Have they informed the Maraji? And so one has to really think carefully here about countries like different countries where usurpation is prominent. I mean, sometimes you may see a plot of land in Tanzania was suddenly usurped under the name of nationalization. It belonged to a Hindu. The Hindu was the owner of that plot of land. And then suddenly they came and they took it away. If you were to live on that plot and have an apartment on that plot, you would have to get the permission and consent of the Hindu. It doesn't matter. So even in Iran it may happen, but in large proportions we see it in Australia, Canada, America and other countries. The problem is that sometimes you have doubt if X land is usurped or not. That's one issue. Sometimes it's substantiated before you that it is usurped. And sometimes it's substantiated before you, this plot of land in Canada, it's not usurped because they weren't living there. It was always a bare desert or barren land. The rulings are different here. If it's substantiated before you that X plot of land is all usurped, then yes, you have no right. Now, because there were people there and their properties were taken away from them. And if you're satisfied in moving in such a place, you'll have a share of the genocide and ethnic cleansing which led to all that. The issue is this, that, okay, are there inheritors, because they've passed away now, the original indigenous populations. Are there inheritors with us or not? Do we have inheritors? Do they have inheritors? If they don't have inheritors, in fiqh, in our jurisprudence, it goes under a category called anfal. And chapter 8 is called anfal also, where it enters a specific protocol, and the infallible of the time, or during occultation, the Islamic leadership of the time, they have to give it to, it's the share of the canonically needy people, those whose expenses overweigh or outweigh their income. It goes to them. So if there are no inheritors, even then, it goes to the canonically needy, not to anyone. If there are inheritors, well then it has to be given to the inheritors. There's no doubt about it. Now, sometimes the inheritors, they know they had a plot of land in a certain district, but they can't delineate exactly that this was our plot of land. They know in general terms, they know in indeterminate terms that yes, we had land there, it was usurped, but we don't know which plot exactly. If they knew the exact place where their land was taken, well, that exact place has to be returned to them. And even all those owners of that exact place are indebted to those inheritors. All those who live there, one after the other, will be indebted to the inheritor. That's if you know the exact plot of land. If you don't know though, you know your land has, the inheritor knows that their land has been usurped, but can't say it's this piece of land, they only know in general terms, not specific terms, then that land also goes again into the category of anfal, and it has to be given to the canonically needy. And here the wali of the time, the Islamic leadership here says, look, here we have people who their rights have been trespassed and their lands have been, the principle of justice dictates they have a share of that too, to whatever degree that the wali decides. And so here one has to take care and be careful that this is a life-changing, destiny-making decision. Going to Canada, there are these risks. Going to certain parts of America, there are these risks. Australia, and so on and so forth. Now, why this has gone out of hand, I really don't know. But there's definitely a miscommunication sometimes between the manager and the representatives. The manager is sitting in a house. Sometimes they have the best advisors in medicine, in all domains. But sometimes there may be a slip. It's possible. But it's something to really be concerned about and not readily promote. Now, when I gave such lectures some time ago, some people wrote to certain Maraji. I was speaking about going to the West and the problems associated with going to the West, and 3 people wrote to 3 different Maraji. 2 of them, the Maraji gave the answer in handwriting. One of them gave it in handwriting, the other gave the answer, the office gave the answer, but the manager ticked it, and I'll explain what that means. And the third, though, I don't have permission to share the letter, but it's the same content, but for whatever reason, yes. I want to share with you 2 of those letters that was given. The first was given to Ayatollah Najafi in Iraq. The question was, is living in Canada or the US considered haram even if a Muslim tries to follow the Islamic rules? Would our ibadat be haram and not acceptable to Allah as we live in usurped land? So this person is assuming that maybe that where they're living is usurped, and if that's the case, what would our ruling be? And look at the reply. Don't expect the Maraji always to answer directly. They don't do that sometimes because their responsibility is giving the general rulings. When the question is saying, is it okay to live in Canada or US, there's responsibility here for the manager. They don't enter the particularities. It causes problems if they do. It causes a lot of chaos maybe. I asked someone very high up in one of the Maraji's office, why don't you open up this usurpation issue? And he simply said to me, it will cause chaos and bedlam. And that's what he said. And now some people say that no, the Maraji accepts it. Living on usurped land is tararan. It's out of necessity. What can we do now? There's no other choice. Well, if you say out of necessity, this clause itself has certain implications and certain modes of action that has to be abided by. For example, if I'm dying and all I have access to is pig meat, out of necessity I can consume pig meat. How much pig meat can I consume? They say only that much which saves you from dying. So if 2 morsels of pig meat saves me from dying, okay, I'm only allowed to have 2 morsels. I can't have 3 morsels of pig meat. It's haram. Pig, the meat of swine, pig, sorry, yes. Like pork, yes. I can't have 3 morsels or 4 because it's haram. 2 morsels is haram, but 2 morsels is justified. Why? It was out of necessity. I'm going to die. Now, will I then want to stay in the same place the next day and the next day and after a year, just staying in the same place and saying, well, it's out of necessity? Or do I want to move away? Why should I choose a lifestyle which entails haram? You see? Here too, if this is usurped land and it's substantiated to be usurped land, okay, if it's out of necessity, why is the house getting bigger and bigger? Why are you adding to the house? Why do you keep moving from place to place in better areas? Look, that means you've become comfortable with the lifestyle of haram. You have to only suffice with the minimum. Even your salat has to be limited to one place. You can't keep on doing salat in different places. You limit it. And then, after 20, 30, 40 years, you're still in that usurped land. And you've become comfortable with the haram. Even if you doubt, look, when you doubt X land is usurped, can you pray? The answer is yes. Can you do fasting? Yes, if you doubt. But can you buy and sell and rent? Ownership related matters? They say no. The Maraji say no. Even though you're doubting, it's not substantiated. Okay, your ibadat will be accepted because you're doubting the land. But ownership related transactions you're not allowed to do. So, coming back to the question, is living in Canada or the US considered haram even if a Muslim tries to follow the Islamic rules? Would our ibadats be haram and not acceptable to Allah as we live on usurped land? Reply. Ayatollah Najafi says this. Acknowledge, my dear son, acknowledge, if you are able in abiding by religion, you and your dependents, like your spouse and children, i.e., the government does not compel you in abandoning anything of the wajibat, or does not compel you in executing anything of the muharramat, the sins, and the government does not forbid your dependents, my believing daughters, from abiding by the perfect hijab, which covers the face from non-mahrams and the like. If you can do this, it's permissible for you to reside in such a place where you are able in practicing your religion's slogans. And if the government prohibits you from anything of that we have mentioned above, and you're not able to stand against them, then it's wajib upon you to leave that place wherein you are not able to abide by the religion. As Allah, immaculate is He, has said, chapter 4 verse 75, our Lord, take us out of this city of oppressive people. Only that much of the verse was mentioned. Chapter 4 verse 75, yes. And only this part was written. The verse is much more, but only this part he wrote. Okay, so the stamp of approval was given. It was given in his own handwriting. Now there's no explicit mention of usurping here. That was the question. In his answer there was a question of the perfect hijab. Now, maybe he was thinking of France where the burqa is prohibited and things like that. I don't know. But usurping is one of those sins. So here, but yes, if you really can practice your religion, all prophets came, all messengers came, and i'budullah wajtanibu at-taghut. Do ibadat of Allah and go against the taghut. If you can do that in these countries, that's good. And as long as your wajibat, you're free to do them, and you're not compelled to do the muharramat. Now muharramat here, usurping would fall here if the land is usurped and you believe it to be the case, or if there's doubt in relation to ownership related transactions. Another was Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi in Iran, and this is in relation to living in the West. Here the question is this: what is the ruling of living in European countries when its society leads people to commit a vice such as not wearing the hijab and such as openly belittling or disgracing religion, and which leads one towards ethical perversions. Is it permissible for a Muslim to live in such countries if he or she believes negative consequences will arise in relation to one's doctrine, behavior, or heart's affinity towards religion, either in the near future or in the long term? That's part A of the question. The answer of part A, it's not permissible to live in such countries. B, what is the ruling when one is him or herself immune, but believes immune from deviation? They themselves are immune, but believes there to be a danger of deviation for those who are one's dependents, namely spouse, children and grandchildren. That was B. The answer for B, it will also not be permissible to live in such countries. C, is the ruling different for those who are missionaries, scholars doing tabligh, or active, or those who are active in the propagation of Islam? And what is the minimum extent of religion that should be propagated? Answer, it is permissible for missionaries and those active, those active means they're not scholars, but they're active in propagation, if they and those under them, their dependents, are immune from danger. So even if the scholar or the non-scholar, but they're active in propagation, if they or their dependents are not immune, even they're not allowed. And D, will a Muslima's, a female Muslim's wearing of hijab suffice vis-a-vis it qualifying as spreading religion? Answer, wearing the hijab is necessary and wajib, but it's not sufficient with respect to qualifying as spreading religion. Just by wearing a hijab, you're not a muballigh, active in propagating religion just by wearing the hijab. With these 4 answers he gave, it was in a letter, and there was an equal sign after each answer. And that equal sign indicates that he personally, it's something the Maraji have, they personally went through and read the answers and then gave the okay, and when they put the equal sign, that means it's been approved and the answers are approved. So the general principles are self-evident. Now sometimes there are applications which may have slipped the offices of the Maraji. And some people have come to me, and maybe you have questions on a similar, that this will cause a lot of chaos. And I agree, it's going to cause a lot of chaos now. Those who are there and there's really no way out, okay, they just suffice with a minimum, at least don't make it worse. But at least from now we can educate our communities and really show them this, and let them, if they want to migrate to the West, let them do it with awareness, and it shouldn't be done irresponsibly. Okay, that was one issue which is a challenge today. There are 2 other matters here that I wanted to mention. Although there was one point I want to speak of the khums, because if the khums isn't given in a particular way, you're usurping the imam's rights, but that needs explanation and I won't have time for anything else. 2 other matters, I just mentioned these in passing. One is haram loans, riba, where you get a loan from a bank and then they charge you interest. That's haram. There's no doubt about it. It's something that the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, or one is get scared when they read the spiritual side effects of those who enter a transaction of riba. Here too we see answers and replies from the offices of the Maraji. For example, with mortgages, which entails interest, they say, well, if your status is such that renting it will belittle you in the community, it's okay to buy a house on riba. And then they give these certain ways that you shouldn't intend it, but if they took it from your account, it's okay. Look, I respect these answers from the offices. I don't have an issue there. If they say it's an exception and they're relating it from the Maraji, I accept. My problem is that we're sufficing with the bare minimum, with the pig meat again. That's my problem. And we're not giving the awareness. What's the use of fiqh and the fuqaha just giving the bare minimum of everything? People will abuse it. It will become a lifestyle decision for them, which is haram. But it will be justified because of certain exceptions you fall in. And in the West, everything is based on the interest they get from the loans. The economy is based on this. And so one has to think about this when you go to the West and you want to start a business or you want to buy a house and so on and so forth. Don't take these kind of loans. It doesn't matter. Don't let the barakah run out of your life. And one can speak a lot about riba, its definition, its jurisdiction, but that wasn't the main. I just wanted to mention ghasb, although riba I've spoken about elsewhere. And so that's another challenge for Muslims and their lifestyle. And one final challenge, and it's more political. As I say, with political things I may be wrong, don't worry about it. I'm just sharing with you. It's good to see Iran in a good light. And I know all of you do and everything. But Iran is quite an important country today. You heard of Shahid Qasim Soleimani. He said the haram in his will, the haram today is Iran. If they get rid of this haram, the other Abrahamic harams will be taken away, be eliminated. And Qasim Soleimani, well, someone who really, Ayatollah Sistani had a lot of respect for him. They would have a lot of discussions together. He's shared many things in his conversations with Ayatollah Sistani. And he gave his life for Islam. For all his life. In the Iran-Iraq war, where the West imposed this war, the world imposed this war against Iran, with one or two exceptions such as Syria, when all the world, all the Middle Eastern countries, Muslim countries, were all against Iran for 8 years. Syria wasn't. And he was about 18, 19 years of age, and since then, until his martyrdom, he was always on the battlefronts, be it in the former Yugoslavia, Palestine, the political wing of Hamas. He was there at the burial of Shahid Soleimani and called him Shahid al-Quds, Shahid of Palestine. Because he did a lot there. He laid a lot of groundwork there. Hamas isn't a terrorist organization. They may have done things like if killing of innocent children and women is intentional, yes, that is an act of terrorism. If it's intentional, if that happens, we should never accept such actions. Sometimes it's unintentional, it happens. That's very sad. And war entails that. But they're not out there to kill innocent children and women. But there may be errors pertaining to them, it's possible. Hezbollah too, even more so, they're more pure in their ideology and they're more attentive, they have more prudence, making sure that innocent life isn't killed. They focus on soldiers at war against Islam, they attack them. I diverted a bit. Yes, so try to see Iran in a good light. Iran has many faults, I understand, but don't listen to whatever you hear on CNN, Fox News and different channels in relation to Iran, BBC, in relation to Iran. 99% of it is rubbish. I myself, they reported against me, many of these news channels, saying that I told that person 7-8 years ago to go and kill 50 people in a gay bar in Sanford in Florida. They said, I told him. Rubbish. This is the quality of news that BBC, CNN have. And they're talking a lot against Iran. Iran has many problems, but not what they're saying. And Iran is for all Muslims' benefit. It's a safe, very important headquarters for the Muslim world. So when someone from your community is a very good brother, I've benefited from his talks, and he's a very good brother, and he's an anchor in the United States. When Mahsa Amini died whilst kept in a police station waiting for the police, she had a previous illness and she fainted. The video cameras got her. All the West suddenly said that she was beaten to death. And even there were videos which came later with the father and the doctor speaking, and the doctor saying, "Where are the bruises? There's nothing here." And the father says, "I never said she was beaten." And then this poor anchor Muslim brother from your community said, "I am Mahsa Amini." Good grief, what does that mean? This is a very bad statement to make. I am Mahsa Amini. Even someone who is very intelligent can get drowned in the waves of Western media. Or for example, a well-known speaker said, well, what's happening in Iran at the time of Mahsa Amini? We usually, when Daesh does it, we attack it. Now we're seeing it happening in Iran, comparing it with Daesh. I mean, these statements are very lethal to mention in communities. Iran has a very important place, and they're working in the best interest of all Muslims, but it's very difficult sometimes. Sometimes you have to be friends with your enemy's enemy, even though they're not a kind of people that you usually make friends with, but since they are the enemy of Islam's enemy, you have to make certain transactions with them. You have to cooperate. So if we see Iran doing things in the political front, we shouldn't despair or lose hope. We have to be polite before the wisdom of, for example, the leader and the Maraji, who are surveying all this. And try not to, quickly see it in a negative light. There may be other things that we have to give the benefit of the doubt. Okay. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.